The Jets offense gets right back on track with a big 5-3 victory over the Calgary Flames. Nothing like beating the Flames twice in 1 week.
You're Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss an episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, the Jets have just beaten the Calgary Flames. Vibes are high. You are probably still finishing out LA versus the Dodgers, versus the Jays. Obviously, the Jays have had a crazy night. Addison Barger, grand slam. How about that? The first pinch hit grand slam in World Series history. Pretty crazy night. But of course, the Jets are, trying to take care of business. Folks filled out Canada Life Center despite it being a Jays game night. And you got some Jays highlights if you were in the arena. So it has to be a pretty fun night for Winnipeg fans. You had Velarde getting in on the action, Morrissey dropping like a 3 or 4 point night, Taves even scoring his first Winnipeg home goal, which is fantastic. And of course, just getting back to winning ways after a bit of a tough night last night, where the Jets offense really could not find a way past Joey Daccord and that Kraken slot defense. So want to chat about this game, some things that stood out, and then also talk a little bit about an interesting trade that dropped earlier today. Lukas Reichel going to the Vancouver Canucks for a 4th-round pick in 2027. Interesting trade, and one that I think maybe the Jets should think about doing stuff like in a similar way in the future. And we'll talk about sort of when those risks are good ideas and when maybe you should stay away. And finally, of course, the Jets are also going to be facing one of their toughest teams already this year in Utah this coming Sunday. I want to talk about the start to the Utah Mammoth season and what to expect in this game with the Jets. But before we do, did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, like I said, the Jets have just come off of a big win against the Flames, 5-3. Was a pretty back-and-forth game and at even strength for what little 5v5 play there was. Calgary had the edge overall. Not that it necessarily matters. The Jets are coming off of a back-to-back. This is the second half of consecutive nights of play. Not really shocking that Winnipeg might be a step slower. Calgary is also one of those teams that's a little interesting, right? They are, in every sense of the word, bad. Like, no one's going to sit here and tell you they're a good team. But despite the fact that they are tanking for a top 3 lottery pick, they play the right way. I mean, there's no arguing that. They fight on every shift. They give you hell every game. They're not a team that backs down from anyone. Yeah, they do concede quite a few goals, and offensively, they typically don't score a lot. So tonight was a real rarity for them getting a multi-goal game. But, just one of those things where despite the fact that they get their teeth kicked in almost every game against a lot of really good opponents, they still fight. And they pushed the Jets a little bit tonight, more so because Winnipeg kept getting itself into some penalty trouble. But so did the Flames. Like, the Flames took, 6 or 7 penalties? The Jets had 5 or 6. It was crazy. A lot of this game was spent on special teams. So the 5v5 flow, I think it was really hard to get into. And for a Jets team that was coming off the back of, consecutive nights of play, I don't think it made things super, super easy. Colin Miller also came into the lineup, as well as Nikita Tribrikov subbing in for Brad Lambert. Miller, unfortunately, really didn't have the best of games. Not super shocking. I think in general, this is one of those scenarios where his rust was pretty apparent. And, the Jets back end, even with him, is still going to struggle. I mean, you're going to have him working alongside Hayden Fleury and Logan Stanley, whoever else. And it's just, it's not a super sustainable way to have that unit arranged. But again, you're just trying to minimize the damage. And the one thing that you really want from Miller is to get the puck on net. I didn't really think he had that many opportunities to do that tonight. It felt like his offense, which is really one of the things that he would help with, wasn't really able to be as impactful as it's been in other games. Partly because, I think so much of this game was spent on special teams to where he didn't really have that many shifts. It sort of felt like the Jets just did not have a lot of 5v5 game flow. And because of that, the Jets PK was really stretched. I thought that they did, about as heroic of a job as it gets. Yeah, they did concede a goal or two, a goal to Kadri on the power play. But obviously this unit has killed 25 straight power plays before that one. So they've been doing about as much as possible. The goaltending on the PK has been phenomenal. Really just pressuring opponents, making it hard for them. And the nice thing about this October schedule is that a lot of the teams the Jets are facing while they're shorthanded are not going to have the most elite power plays. Still, though, any power play is always a man advantage. And I think for the Jets to keep pressuring the way they have, to make life very difficult on opponents, it's been very refreshing to see. Just great stuff from Winnipeg, right? These little detail plays that can help them in key critical situations is nothing to really overlook. And I think in this moment, especially when your 5v5 game may not be as astute as it was, you may have a little bit of challenges working this new power play unit without Ehlers. All that stuff, factoring in, it's great when you can get some other contributions from the rest of your team. So a big performance from the PK unit tonight. They were they were a little busy, if I can be honest. But in terms of the overall game, the Jets were solid, right? The first period not so great. The second period, Winnipeg really started to wake up. You had a great Morrissey play where he undressed Mackenzie Weegar in the neutral zone to create a good goal-scoring opportunity for Kyle Connor on a 2-on-1. You had Taves getting a nice deflection from another Morrissey assist. Velarde finally getting his first goal of the season on the power play. Mark Scheifele got him a nice little pass, and Velarde kind of did this squeaky little play that squeezed a puck right through. So Scheifele quietly continuing his point streak. He also assisted later on Iafalo's power play goal as well. Just really, important contributions here from this power play unit when, maybe the 5v5 game was a little up and down. The top line looked a little more tired tonight. The depth for the Jets for the first time, I think, really struggled. The third and fourth lines really could not get a lot of solid play tonight. I think the fourth line probably had one of its worst games of the season. The third line wasn't particularly special. So a lot of it really had to come from, honestly, I thought the second line, doing some really good work tonight. Chibrikov, Taves, and Iafalo, I thought, were busy. Taves himself said, last night that they had to do more and step up and not rely on the top line to do all the offense. And guess what? Taves 100% lived up to his own statement. I thought he had more jump tonight. I thought he looked a little more impactful. And I don't think anyone's going to sit here and say that Taves is dominating and just controlling play at an elite level. But if you can at least be break even and kind of help out with some occasional depth scoring here and there, especially in this middle six capacity, that's really all you can hope for, right? As long as Taves is not being an anchor, I think that's the most positive thing. And I thought tonight he did a pretty solid job. So all around, a really good rebound win for the Jets, obviously. Look, it's the Flames, right? But any amount of points that you can bank early is always good, and especially when you're going to be facing your second real big test of the season here in the Utah Mammoth. Now, amidst all of this, there was a trade that happened earlier in the day. I want to chat about whether the Jets should ever consider doing something like this, because, these little cheap reclamation projects ordinarily wouldn't make this Jets team better. But we've seen that offense for Winnipeg might be a little bit of a challenge at times this year, especially at even strength. And when you're kind of needing to find maybe a little more consistency from your middle six or bottom six scoring, maybe a Reichel type deal is more up Winnipeg's alley than you'd normally think. We'll chat about why coming right up. Let's be real, making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress, I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED, designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. It's easy to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor, 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments, no shame or embarrassment or judgment. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. Visit rugiet.com/lockedonnhl to get 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/lockedonnhl, and don't forget to use our code LOCKEDONNHL so they know we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a total headache, right? Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on a team like the Winnipeg Jets. That's where Gametime comes in. It's the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. Now, I've used Gametime buying Ravens playoff tickets, and it really couldn't have been simpler, right? I got a panoramic seat view. I knew all of my fees and prices up front. No surprise charges, no, stringing me along until checkout. It was all up front. And, prices for games often drop faster the closer you get to the start of the game, right? So if you want a cheap Jets ticket, this is your best chance to find maybe even something like a zone deal. You can pick the section, Gametime picks your seats, and you could save big. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we're chatting a little bit about an interesting little trade that dropped earlier today. Lukas Reichel getting sent from the Chicago Blackhawks to the Vancouver Canucks, right? And Vancouver is, for context, really struggling. They have not exactly had the worst ever start to the season, but yeah, they look pretty crappy. And I think this is not super shocking to anyone who has actually looked at how the Canucks have played the past couple of years. Yes, they had that 1 year under Tocchet where they really looked like special and fun, but I think a lot of people understood that the truth of this team was a little more complicated. Yes, they have some individually bright moments and they can be a good team, but I think the overall sample and trend was that they were kind of outshooting a lot of their bigger issues. And, you can only maintain that for so long. And so here they are dealing with, Pettersson not really being an elite 1C, needing some depth options with Hedl out. So they do this little fourth-round pick for Lukas Reichel. It's a 2027 fourth-rounder. And Reichel had kind of been on the market a little bit recently as a player the Hawks wanted to ship out. Now, typically, I wouldn't really have a lot of interest in, a depth addition. But when it comes to a guy like Reichel, he's got an interesting profile, right? First off, he's a pretty gifted skater. He's a fast zone entry and transition expert. The rest of his game is where I think a lot of folks really had some question as to what his actual potential is. As a 22, 23-year-old, he's really not looked offensively the most gifted player. Defensively, you see some interest there, maybe as a special teams kind of guy. Again, his transition game is very strong. But in terms of what he actually does in the offensive zone, it's been a little bit more of a mystery box. The thing with a guy like Reichel is that when you have a really good base set of some traits and techniques and tools, right? If you get him into a more supportive environment where you think maybe your coaching staff can take advantage of what he's already got, and you look at a guy who's very young, who still has some upside, and has already put up, even with all of his flaws, an almost 30-point season, just last year, there may be a little bit more worth and value in doing a deal like this. There are some other players out there that are kind of being floated out a little bit early. Yegor Chinakhov is apparently being rumored to about 3 or 4 different teams that have already inquired about his availability. The Blue Jackets said they don't want to just give him away. Yeah, I could see that. Chinakhov is, in my mind, a player who could be very interesting for the Jets. For one thing, he's not small. Everyone seems to really value size right now. And he's like a 6'1", 200-pound winger. He's got pretty good underlying numbers in very small sample sizes. The limited shifting obviously can be a little bit of a challenge to figure out what a guy is capable of. But Chinnikov is a pretty solid finisher. He's a creative playmaker, and he has a surprising defensive streak in him, right? Not too dissimilar from maybe a guy like Perfetti. Now, he doesn't have the IQ in passing necessarily, but his interesting results kind of paint him as a guy where if you get him at the right price, it might be worth it. Last year's Jets team, I think it would have been harder to make an argument for doing something like this. This year's Jets team, though, we have a lot of guys who are doing a fairly okay job, but I don't think they are necessarily locked down to the roles that they have. Take, for example, like Goose, right? I think Goose has been fine, for his first few games. He hasn't scored his first goal yet, but he's got a couple of points and assists. So that's fine. But, I don't see him every game being the kind of guy where I'm like, you can't bench him. There's no opportunity for rotation with him. I don't get that feeling. Taves has kind of been also in a category where I think he's been fine for what you've asked of him. And at times, he'll have some individually great moments. But you also see moments in this game where you're kind of like, obviously you're not going to bench him ever. But maybe you can swap some roles, change things around a little bit. Eventually, as guys get healthier, maybe you kind of drop his minutes down a little bit to split it a little bit more. I don't want to say equitably, but just more in an ideal matchup scenario, right? Maybe you cut back on Taves' minutes just a bit to help boost some of your defensive zone work because, JT hasn't been great there, and I think that has definitely stood out. But offensively, if you put him in the OZ, you're going to continue to see the old JT passing and shooting like he's, in his early or mid-20s again. So a guy like Chinnikov or Reichel or some of these other players, Kako last year was a guy I was pushing for. I think, there is a level of risk, but if you're a Winnipeg, you need more finishing help, right? And you need to find some players who are maybe out of favor with their current franchises that don't really have any sort of trade protections and that have upside that maybe, if they come here, their rights will be controlled by the Jets and they will have less impetus to just jump ship immediately. I know the Winnipeg factor and certainly the living circumstances for young players may not at first be as desirable for some guys, but hearing Dylan DeMello talk about what it's been like to stay here and to see how much he loves the city, seeing all of these other Jets like Connor and Velarde and Scheifele and Hellebuck all re-up huge deals, Pionk re-upping, I think there's a change in the mindset around being a Jet long term. And so bring in these kids. Look at these guys who have some real chance to be an NHLer for you, and maybe you can find some extra finishing talent. I don't know if Reichel was necessarily going to be that guy, but he could have been an interesting low-risk, low-priced gamble. For a fourth-round pick, especially one in the far future, fourth-rounders almost rarely ever become NHLers. The Jets have done good work in those rounds, don't get me wrong, but it's hard to actually find guys who are impact-level players. And Reichel may not have been there just yet, but I think he's got enough tool sets and techniques to work with where maybe, if a team like the Jets finds him, he could become a really valuable middle six player. So in a time where you're trying to find something to really nail down a level of consistency for your team, maybe add some extra cheap skill that can actually boost your shooting talent, stuff like this might be worth swinging on. Reichel, I don't feel nearly as strongly about. Chinnikov, though, is a guy that I would think about chasing. Yegor might legitimately be one of the more underrated pieces out there that's on the market. So, we'll see if the Jets maybe spring for this. Obviously, it's not going to look like a difference maker immediately, I would imagine. And Winnipeg may want something a little bit heavier, right? Maybe they want a more veteran presence. I'm not sure what their plans are for this year. They might just want to ride it into American Thanksgiving in December, see where the team takes them, see where the record goes, and decide from there. It's not like a lot of the stuff is super urgent at the moment, but as we start nearing, in a few months, getting closer and closer and closer to March and springtime, where you're thinking about the playoffs, you're thinking about what this team's going to be capable of, then might be time to start investing more in players like this. So curious to know what you think about the deal. Are there other trades that you would have considered? Are there other players you think might shake loose that could be worth investigating? Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. In just a little bit, I want to talk about our next opponent, though. Going to be a very tough team. This is where, a Reichel or a Chinnikov might be helpful to match up against a team that's got a lot of collective speed and transition ability in the Utah Mammoth. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, pick a bet, put $5 down, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you're a stats nerd, this is your chance to flex your knowledge big time. Maybe you track passing yardage for every quarterback out there, rushing yardage for the league's most gifted runners, or maybe you even like the defensive side of things and you're looking at pressures, sacks, whatever it is. This is your chance to take your knowledge to the next level. Maybe you're just a casual fan who watches football enough to get an intuitive feel of who the best teams are and who you can pick out as the winners of each and every weekend. Take your knowledge to FanDuel. You can win big, and it makes your Sunday Funday watch-alongs so much more entertaining. And best of all, new customer, $5 down, and if it hits on a big bet, you get $300 in bonus bets to keep on winning. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Hey friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On podcast, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us tonight's show as we're just wrapping up here with some thoughts ahead of Winnipeg versus Utah. Now, I was actually not too far off with our score prediction of Calgary versus Winnipeg. I had that game being like a 3-2 win at even, or well, I guess without the goalie pulled, it was like a 4-3 Jets win. So I feel if I'm going to call this game before we even talk about it, I think this is going to be a 4-2 Utah win. I hate to say it, but I do think that the Mammoth have the sort of firepower, speed, and skill to make a Jets team really sweat and struggle. And when you look at this Utah lineup, you'll start to understand why. Up front, you've got Keller, Hayton, and Schmaltz as your first line. And Schmaltz has now remembered how to score goals, which is a problem. So you've already got really good skill in a guy like Hayton, who was one of those players I would have thought, the Jets might have been targeting, but Utah was sort of loath to let him go from what I understand. And so he has become a really top-notch young center for them with, a lot of skill. And it helps them kind of bring in this heftier, skilled matchup because then you've got your elite finishing line of Paterka, Cooley, and Genther. And Cooley has just been on another level to start the season. There were rumors, apparently, that he wasn't super thrilled about being with Utah. I don't know what's going on with that. He's not showing it on the ice, so he's having a grand time, apparently. I don't know. Paterka seems to have fit in quite well, and Genther just continues to be an absolute menace with his shooting talent. I mean, the kid's just elite. On the bottom six, you've got a lot of underappreciated talent. Krause, McBain, and Carcone have been, a bit of a heavy lifting unit on the forecheck. And then, of course, our old friend Brandon Tanev recently signed a deal with Utah. And then he's been paired with O'Brien and Stenlund. Now, actually, I remember O'Brien from his Hershey Bears days, but Stenlund's the one that we all probably remember because he's a pretty fun, fourth-line center with underappreciated skill. The kind of free agent where, maybe he's like a bit of a Cole Koepke sort of find. Smart, defensively responsible, and actually has okay hands. Maybe he's not going to score 30 goals, but he's pretty solid for what he is. On their defense, they've got Sergachev and Simashev, Schmidt and Marino, of course, our old friend Nate Schmidt signing here, and then Cole and Mata on the third pairing. And in net, we've all remembered Karel Vejmelka. You've also got Vanacek as well. So this team is pretty well balanced. They're fast. Turney has got them playing very up-tempo hockey. And last year, we saw them be one of the only teams that I think really hurt the Jets at 5v5. The closest comparison I can think of is when we saw the Ravens play the Eagles a year or so ago. I sat there and I was like, the Ravens have obviously steamrolled everyone, but the Eagles were the best team they'd played and actually humbled them. And Utah's style and the way that they play at 5v5 is kind of equivalent. The Mammoth are one of the only teams that I've seen in the last year or two outside of like a Colorado or something, really control the game against the Jets at an elite level last season, right? This year is going to be a different scenario. I don't want to judge it too closely because the Jets just don't have the 5v5 game right now and roster to handle a team like this. So if the Jets get a point out of this game, awesome. Like if you find a way to survive and take it to overtime or even win, that should be a big confidence booster. Yes, you are technically ahead of Utah in the standings right now, but we know that the Mammoths were going toe-to-toe with an Avs team that has looked resurgent and reborn with Landeskog back in tow, and the Mammoth ended up edging them out in overtime. So very clearly, Utah is a pretty dang good team. I'm looking at this Mammoth squad as one of the real sleeper cup contenders this year, and if they do some stuff at the trade deadline, watch out. This team has a lot of speed, a lot of skill, and as guys like Cooley and Genther continue to improve, once Dursey comes back on their back end, Simashev, obviously a really top pick for them. He's going to be a big piece going forward. This team has some really scary talent to work with. No, it's not going to be like the McDrysaddle level players, but when I talk about winning by committee and kind of doing more, maybe with a roster that's different from some of the teams that have gone to the Cups recently, I think the Mammoth are a team that sort of exemplifies this model. This is where I feel like, what we saw with the Jets maybe in 17-18 is something a little bit like this. This Mammoth team is a little faster and a little younger, but there are some similar principles, just maybe with a few less of the ELCs you might normally associate. So this is going to be a fun game. Going to be very interesting to see how the Jets game plan for this, to see if they can slow Utah down. Again, I'm predicting a 4-2 Mammoth win, but would love to be proven wrong here. Let's see if the Jets can come out with a big victory. Drop your score predictions in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's show, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday, so thanks for all you do. Have a great night, and go Jets go.